Hola, comadres. How are you today? What I want to talk about today on the Pep Talk is emotions. Strong emotions, fear, anger, frustration, disbelief, shock, desperation, just panic. I think that describes a range of grief, like just describes a range of things that's been going on for a lot of people in our community and beyond over the past week. I went in the lunchroom today, which a lot of times I eat at my desk or whatever in my classroom. And I was in the main lunchroom because I went to use the microwave. I had something I needed to heat up, and I realized that I quickly became very emotionally dysregulated with a conversation that somebody was having at the next table. They were showing a colleague a video, and it was a fire alarm going off, and I just went into panic mode. I just went into panic mode. I felt an anxiety attack coming. I wasn't even sure if it was a fire alarm on the phone that they were looking at or whether it was over in the other building. And I just went on high alert. And I just had to I asked, is that on your phone? Well, it turns out they were watching a film or watching a piece of some Netflix series that was about a school shooting. And I was just like, I was just not capable to process that in any kind of way. It's like it invaded me. I'm there just trying to eat my lunch, and I felt I just went into panic mode. And one of the things that I know cognitively is that was a fire alarm on a movie. It wasn't a real event that was happening now, hoy en día. Yet it elicited that same panic response as if there were a real fire or a real emergency. And it makes me realize if I, as an adult, with many resources at my disposal, get emotionally dysregulated over a sound, how much more difficult is this going to be? And is this for anyone who's experienced trauma? Most of us have watched the news stories, we've heard interviews, we've been devouring information about it. About the school shooting last Tuesday, and we were not firsthand witnesses or participants, but I believe that as a society we are all victims of this kind of tragedy. There is a shared trauma that's going on for anyone who has empathy. Emotional dysregulation is when we can tell it, we just can't talk ourselves out of fear, pain, grief, panic. We can know cognitively something, but the emotional part of our brain takes over. Like one of the things that I've learned, that there's a hand model. And so if you imagine your brain like a fist, there's this part of your hand that's down here, the base, and then there's the fingers that cover. Well, one of the neurologists, that I follow, one of the doctors that I've read his work and gone to his seminars, he talks about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. And the downstairs brain is like the brain stem. It's the emotional part of the brain. It's the limbic system. It's the way down here is the part of the brain that keeps you breathing, that your reactions, your physical connection of body parts to thoughts, This is kind of like the automatic part of the brain that keeps going. And then within here is the limbic system, which is where all your memories are stored. Everything that's ever happened to us, everything we've experienced, whether or not we remember it with thoughts and are able to put in words, it's stored down here in the downstairs brain. So the downstairs brain contains all of the emotions and trauma and good experiences. The upstairs brain is the part that kind of goes over the roof and kind of protects the downstairs brain. So the upstairs brain is our planning, thinking, worrying. It is the reasoning part of our brain. We got the emotional part of the brain and we've got the reasoning part of the brain. If something happens to activate the emotional part of the brain in a big time kind of way, we can blow our top. And it's very possible that we will not be able to talk ourselves down from what we're feeling. When we think of a young child, the majority of their brain is the limbic system. They're just starting to get the executive functioning, the planning, thinking, worrying, figuring things out, the thoughts, the feelings take over. If you think about when you get really angry, it's like all reason is gone, kapow, right? Well, the reality is that when we are in fear, panic, grief, pain, worry, we're not going to be able to keep a lid on it. The emotional dysregulation is where I'm trying to figure out what do I do with what I'm feeling right now. And that's what I was feeling over there in the cafeteria. I just felt complete emotional dysregulation. I was able to tell myself that's not a real emergency. The thinking part of my brain could say that's not a real emergency, but the emotional part of my brain was like, oh shit, it's going down. Like the panic happened. And that's one of the things for us to be aware of, that whenever we have a strong reaction to something and we can be even like, I don't know why I got so upset about that. There's something down here in the downstairs part of the brain. Sometimes people will say things like, well, that happened when they were so little. It's a good thing, like they won't remember. The reality is that trauma is already stored in the downstairs brain. So learning to love and accept ourselves and figure out, what do I need? What do I need? How do I help myself when I'm blowing my top? And blowing your top is not just about being angry. It can also be about fear and panic. And I had to do a little self-talk. But it wasn't helping me when I felt the anxiety come up really high over hearing that fire alarm over and over. And I wasn't sure what to do. Like the thinking part of my brain might have said, do you mind turning that down? Or do you mind watching that later? But I couldn't think and process. I was just like, freak out, freak out, freak out, freak out. And I realized that I had to take some time for me to bring my emotions to a place where my brain could listen to itself. Like what happens is we are programmed to survive. We're programmed to protect ourselves. We are programmed to keep going in spite of obstacles and dangers. So sometimes there's going to be fight, sometimes there's going to be flight, sometimes there's going to be freeze. And the reality is we cannot always tell our brain what to think because it's already feeling. So, when I think about everyone who was part of being there that day, the parents who rushed to the school, the first responders, the teachers inside, the children who survived did not leave unscathed. The downstairs part of their brain got a huge amount of input that is going to continue to be very painful and very difficult. And one of the things that we know about trauma is that we don't remember trauma, we re-experience it. So it's just as bad as if it were happening. It's not like we can remember, like if it was something that happened in the past. True fear and pain that we've experienced, it's trapped down here in the limbic system, in the amygdala, and that can go off at any time. So, when we talk about somebody with PTSD, that's an example of trauma not necessarily coming back up, because the trauma's been there all along, but that the trauma in the downstairs brain keeps taking over. And it's really difficult. And that's going to be true for all of us. There's things that every one of us is sad or afraid about that we may or may not know the root. Like, where did that first start in my life? What did I experience to make me feel that way? Sometimes we're not going to know the answer. Someone who's a survivor of a violent act, they're going to know the answer. They know where the trauma came from. They know where the fear came from. What I think is important is that we be gentle with ourselves, that we be accepting of how we are and who we are, and that we have a level of respect for whatever anyone's feeling. We don't get to decide how long someone should be grieving. We don't get to decide how mad they should be about that. We don't get to decide if they should be over it by now. The reality is, our brains are unique organisms. They're filled with unique experiences. They're filled with unique, some people are scared to death of spiders. You can't even talk to them about a spider. They don't even want to look at a picture of a spider. And somebody else is not. We have different experiences that are back in our foundation. And the reality is, there doesn't have to be logic to what triggers a strong reaction in us. So, although I wasn't in Uvalde, I've been carrying trauma. That trauma is not going to go away. It's going to flare up now and again. I want to do what I can do to keep people safe. My emotions are engaged throughout this entire process, and I'm sure yours are too. Fear is universal. There's no one who's exempt from it. There's no one who's exempt from worry or panic or trauma. So when you feel those things coming up, I think the healthy thing is to give yourself what you need to process. If you need to talk. If you need to be quiet, be quiet. If you need to journal. If you need to step out. If you need to leave the situation that is triggering your fear, your anxiety, then do that. It's going to take a lot of time and work, and there's never going to be a reset button for trauma. But we can be loving and caring towards ourselves and others as we work to process it and release it. We can't get rid of it. The reality is, trauma in our life, people say, I've overcome it. The reality is that we have moved forward. We have learned, and the pain is still the pain. So if you're feeling pain, worry, fear, you're not alone. You're not alone. A lot of us are experiencing those things along with you. My heart goes out to everyone who lost someone they know. By this point, I feel this level of consciousness should come up anytime and every time that someone is taken from us by violence. And my hope is that there will be some change, there will be some legislation coming forward, some practices coming forward. I just know that in the meantime, I need to honor myself, and I need to honor those around me, and be present to myself and be present to others. I love you, comadres. I appreciate you taking this time for me to share these thoughts with you. And I just ask you to continue to spread peace and acceptance, and continue to seek healing and light in the world. Even in those dark times, if we can continue, press on, and know that we make a difference in this world, and our impact is far greater than we'll ever know. Take care, comadres.